Clear prop.
Tower 73, Yankee number 2, following twin traffic, 3 mile final, clear passenger. 1 Charlie Bravo, makes straight in runway 25, join 4 mile final.
This is Behind the Prop with United Flight Systems owner and licensed pilot Bobby Doss and his co-host, Major Airline Captain and Designated Pilot Examiner Wally Mulhern. Now let's go Behind the Prop.
What's up, Wally?
Hey, Bobby, how are you?
I am fantastic as always. We are now in the month of December. It's becoming the holiday season. Weather's getting cold. And this is going to be one of those kind of lesson learned shows that we talk through. We're going to talk a little bit about a silent killer, and it's all about managing distractions in the cockpit. We've talked about a lot of stuff, Wally, but I don't think we've ever covered this subject thoroughly. You're a professional pilot. Any shocking stories where professional pilots got distracted?
Yeah, there are quite a few of them. There are two that really come to light, and one of them was Eastern Airlines back in the day. This probably took place. I don't even know the date of this, but I want to say in the 70s. An Eastern Airlines L-1011, which is airliner made by Lockheed, and it looked a little bit like a DC-10. It was a tri-jet, had 3 engines, one on each wing and one mounted in the tail. But I think Delta and Eastern were the two main U.S. airlines that flew them. So it was a wide-body airplane, a big jet, and had 3 pilots with a flight engineer, 2 pilots and a flight engineer. I don't know where they were coming from, but they were attempting to land in Miami, and they put the gear down, and they did not get 3 green lights. So they went out and they held over the Everglades west of Miami Airport, and they're trying to troubleshoot this gear problem. Now, at this point, they didn't know if they really thought they think. I think they thought that one of the gears was not down because they didn't get a green light. And they were out troubleshooting the situation, and I really don't know what exactly they did, but at the end of the day, what was wrong with the airplane was it was a light bulb. A 39-cent light bulb had burned out, and they got distracted. All 3 pilots were focused on the problem at hand rather than someone flying the airplane. Somehow, I guess the autopilot clicked off, and they flew the airplane into the Everglades. A perfectly good airplane. They flew into the Everglades and killed quite a few people. There was another situation. This one hits home a little bit closer. Well, both my parents worked for Eastern Airlines back in the day. They were long gone by the time that accident had happened. But another one was United Airlines flew a DC-8 actually, they flamed out all 4 engines on a DC-8 up in Portland, Oregon, because they were out troubleshooting an issue, and I believe it was the same sort of thing. They had a light bulb with a gear indication, and as they're out there troubleshooting the situation, they ran out of fuel, and they crashed up there as well. So, we can sit here, and it's really easy to Monday morning quarterback everything. I mean, we can go back and we can, look at lots of accidents, and it's real easy to sit here and say, "My gosh, how could this happen?" In both these cases, they were 3 pilot crews, and distractions happened, and there's a lot of dead people because of it. It's still a problem today. I believe if I'm looking at the NTSB data, the NTSB says that in 15 to 20% of general aviation accidents list a distraction as a contributing factor. So I think there's you take a two-pronged approach to this. A, you try not to get distracted. But B, you realize that if you are distracted, you've gotta learn how to manage it, and that's kind of what, what we wanna talk about here.
Yeah, it's kinda crazy. While you're talking, I'm doing a little bit more research. The Eastern Airlines accident happened on December 29th, 1972, and the United Airlines Flight 173 happened on December 28th, 1978. Very
Wow.
eerie that those both happened on the 28th and 29th of December,
Wow.
6 years apart from one another. But it is it and I've had distractions, we've talked about some distractions, but the meat of what we wanna get down to tonight is really how do you manage the distraction? And we talk a lot about aviate, navigate, communicate, but what are some real world practices that we can talk about? We've all heard the Swiss cheese model. We've had a number of pros on this show talk about Paul Craig from the Killing Zone and many others talk about it's not just the dropping a pin or something happening in the cockpit that starts this, right? How do three professional pilots get so distracted by a 39-cent light bulb that they all perish? I think it's human nature. I mean, we're humans, right? Is that not a big part of it?
I think so. I think if we look at everyday life, so we both have kids who are young adults, okay? And so when you first handed your car keys to either your son or your daughter and said, "Here you go somewhere," what what was the thing that scared you the most? And that's a rhetorical question. I know when I did that, the thing that scared me the most was texting and driving, you know? And we are all so attached to our phones. I think we all see accidents. We see maybe a head-on collision. Used to be that the first thing that came to mind was somebody was under the influence of alcohol, probably. Nowadays, I think, I don't know, maybe I'm in the minority, but I think the first thing that we think about is, gee, I wonder if one of the drivers was texting and driving and got distracted. So, it's not just in flying airplanes, it's in that as well.
Yeah, I'm an ex-police officer, so I think I was more worried about the other drivers. I think they were probably gonna be at their best the first time they went around the neighborhood. But, yes, as they got a little bit more time under their belt, I still worry about texting and driving. I My son Snapchats me, and I know he's on the freeway. I'm like, "What are you doing? You can't send me a picture of yourself when you're on the freeway."
Right.
Um, it is I think we're so used to having our phones in our hand as it relates to cars and other stuff, unfortunately, that we don't think it's ever gonna bite us. But that's probably exactly what the other person thought that perished in a car accident.
Yeah.
In a plane, we're just as susceptible, but, in a plane, for me, there's, like, 800 other things going on that we need to be paying attention to. When was the last time I can't remember this, but when was the last time you looked down to see what your RPM setting was, or if you were getting some fluctuation in your RPM setting in a car?
Yeah, it's been a long
Never?
time. Yeah,
It's
right.
been a long time. And so in a plane, we're looking at a voltmeter, an amp meter, an RPM gauge, a airspeed gauge, vertical speed indicator, all bazillion little things, vacuum indicator in some cases. There's a lot of other things we're paying attention to, and any one of those things can distract us and create this Swiss cheese model that was the light bulb the what killed those people? The light bulb didn't kill those people. The distraction of the light bulb killed those
Yeah.
people in Eastern, and we don't wanna dwell on it because it's just a story to hook the listener at this point. How do we prevent all the other things? And we just need to talk about what's in the cockpit that does distract us and create that Swiss cheese model. I would agree with you. It's texting. It's the electronic flight bag. I flew with, a really good friend, recently, and I was shocked how little they looked outside the cockpit in the pattern. We flew 8 laps in the pattern. I was in the co-pilot seat and was a nervous wreck, by the way, not being in control of the airplane. But the amount of time spent inside the cockpit looking at screens in the traffic pattern was mind-blowing to me. I was actually shocked.
Yeah.
You see a lot of applicants, you see a lot of good pilots, you see a lot of bad pilots, I'm sure. What do you see that's distracting us on a regular basis?
Well, it's not just the screen in the iPad, it's sometimes just the screens in the airplane itself. It's
Oh, that's what I'm
not a
talking about. He never looked up from his cockpit.
Yeah, yeah, it's not unusual for, um and the cross countries that I give my applicants, you either go from Houston to Atlanta or Houston to El Paso, depending on the day. So, if we take off, let's say we take off from Hooks on the 17 right, so we're heading south. Let's say it's an El Paso day, we're gonna go right, and maybe their their flight has us going over the Navasota VOR, or maybe it's just a straight line to El Paso, or usually somewhere else for a fuel stop. It's not unusual for at about I don't know, 800, 900 feet, to them to start plugging in direct to whatever airport we're going to into, whether it's a 430, a 530, a G1000 or whatever. But, you know, A, we could have done that on the ground, but B, maybe at 4,500 feet, when we get up to our cruise altitude might be a better use of our time rather than playing around with this at 500 feet.
No question. So, what are some of those things that, we deal with that we shouldn't be dealing with? Okay, we got iPads, and I I don't even use my iPad that often anymore. I think I use a notepad and what the cockpit's giving me. There's definitely a use for my iPad, but I don't have it strapped to my leg anymore. I don't have a yoke mounted anymore. I think I know what the plane's capable of and what I'm doing in the plane, so I'm not using that technology the same way I did early on. But
Yeah.
if I've got the iPad and where I'm in Houston, it's probably gonna die of heat exhaustion long before I want it to, which is a huge distraction. If I'm depending solely on that, I'm in a lot of trouble. Um, how many people do you see stop and not get the right radio frequency tuned in? And just can't imagine there's no one else talking to me at Navasota. That's weird. No, there's 4 planes in the pattern. No one's talking. I keep making my radio calls and just keep flying, and we know what's happening, right? I'm the one
It's
who's wrong, but I'm
yeah.
assuming everybody else is wrong.
It's really interesting you say that because I just had, 2 days ago, had that exact, thing happen. And same airport, Navasota, 122.9, and the applicant had put in 122.95, and he caught it. He said, he goes, "Man, I see another airplane coming in here. It looks like they're coming in to land." He saw it on his iPad because he had a ADSB in, and, he said, he actually called him. He says, "Aircraft approaching Navasota from the southeast, state your intentions," I think is what he said, and they didn't answer, and I just sat there, and then he caught it, and I said, "Okay,
Hmm.
good way of mitigating a mistake." And we flipped over to 122.9, and guess who was talking?
Yeah.
The other airplane. You know,
He was asking y'all, "What are y'all doing? What are y'all doing there? What's your intentions?"
yeah, I think one thing that we learn as more mature pilots is when something's not going right, the first place I look is in the mirror. And, I'll tell on myself, we were starting a 777, uh, this was 2, 3 weeks ago. And it's the job of the first officer to start the engine. He starts the engine all by himself, because while this is going on, we might be being pushed back, but I'm talking to the people on the ground. I'm disconnecting headsets. I'm doing light signals to the marshaller out front. So it's kind of a divided cockpit, sort of. We do back each other up a little bit. But anyway, so the first thing we do is we put the start switches to the start position, and then we flip the fuel switches to the run position. So you've got ignition, you got fuel, and the engine is supposed to start. Well, the first officer, he probably got distracted from something. He did not put the fuel switches to run. So we all know from that high school chemistry class, we need three things for a fire. We need oxygen, we need ignition, and we need fuel. Well, we had two of the three. We did not have fuel. And as I'm talking to the ground person, he says to me, he says, "We're not getting a light off." And I immediately go to the engine instruments, and he was correct. We were not getting a rise in EGT. And my initial thought was, "What are we messing up?" It wasn't, "Oh my gosh, this airplane, there's something wrong with this airplane." My initial thought was, "Oh man, was maintenance working on this airplane? Did they pull circuit breakers? Are we not getting ignition? We were getting rotation, but we weren't getting the light off." So we discontinued the start, and before we made that radio call to maintenance, I said to him, I said, "Okay, let's look at us. What did we miss?" And then he goes, "Oh God." And he probably said, "Oh, expletive. I I I didn't get the fuel on." I go, "Oh, well that'll do it. Let's try it again." So we tried again. Guess what? Two good starts. The engine started just as they were supposed to. So we have, I have learned that when something's going wrong, it's probably us. It's probably me. And kudos to that guy that, just a couple days ago. I mean, he right off the bat, he said, "Wait, this might be me." And he caught it.
Yeah, I still think texting's probably a problem. I probably sent my own picture or two to my family, and my wife would probably say, "Don't fly and text." Slightly different, but you gotta stay in the cockpit. You gotta stay on the game that you're executing here. I think automation has gotta be one of the things that distracts people nowadays,
Yeah.
more than it ever did for me. I never had near the automation that, some of the kids now have at my flight school, but how how good, bad, indifferent do you wanna share the UC applicants actually knowing the equipment that they're using, and then using it effectively and being on top of the game with that equipment?
Yeah, well, we've gotten very reliant on the technology, to an extent where we've allowed situational awareness to go out the window to an extent. And a lot of times if I'm doing a check ride, say out of Conroe, we end up being there's a big lake on the west side of Conroe, a really big lake. And we end up being a little bit west of that lake, um, doing our maneuvers. And that's usually where the final maneuver is of a given check ride. And I will say to them, I will say, "Okay, maybe we've just finished our last thing, whether it be ground reference maneuvers or whatever it might be." I'll say, "Okay, here's the scenario. We're lost. We're not really sure where we are. Take us back to Conroe. Everything is available to you. Altitude at your discretion." And I would say 95% of the applicants, the first place they go to is their GPS and they put in Conroe Airport. Is that wrong? No, absolutely not wrong. However, a lot of times I'll stop them and I'll say, just out of curiosity, why don't you just point the airplane where you think the airport is? And they'll go, "Well, okay, well, I know it's on the other side of the lake. There's a lake, so let me point us at the lake." Okay, so now they pointed in. Guess what? We're going straight to the airport. before they even put it in the GPS. So, I tell them, I say it's not absolutely not wrong to use the GPS, but if we can get going in the perceived correct direction, um, ahead of time, let's go ahead and do that.
Yeah, most of us are probably intuitive enough to point the plane in the right direction for sure, and that 30 seconds might be the difference in getting back, not finishing in the lake, getting across the lake.
Right.
Um, it is one of those skills that comes with maturity and aviation skills, but, something we should try. So let's talk about some practical strategies that can maybe help us with those distractions, and I think this is broken down into a few parts, so we'll break this down. Kinda pre-flight prevention. Man, I've grown up a lot in my own aviation skills. Um, what are your company rules around sterile cockpit, if you can share those?
Yeah, well, sterile cockpit is below 10,000 feet. So, and basically, uh, prior to pushback, it's not, we're not in sterile cockpit, but, when it's game time, we all need to be engaged. And I mean, that cockpit door might be open, but if we're going to start briefing and start talking about the flight, I quite frankly, I've never really had an issue with anybody ever. Because I'll say, okay, are you guys ready to talk about this, or are we ready to brief? And if somebody's right in the middle of doing something, they may say, give me about 90 seconds. Let me finish loading the winds and the FMC or whatever the case may be. Um, but yeah, so uh, from up until 10,000 feet, we are in what we call sterile cockpit, and basically, no non-essential conversation is supposed to happen.
And should we adopt something like that in GA? Like, maybe not 10,000 feet, because I probably never get there, but,
Yeah,
you know, when I start my descent, when I'm below 2,500 feet, like,
yeah,
where is
no,
oh
for sure, absolutely, and most applicants will brief me about sterile cockpit, but they don't adhere to it. They tell me
Wally,
we're
don't
gonna have a
talk to me.
yeah, we're gonna have a sterile cockpit, no non-essential conversation on the flight, and then we're taxiing out, and someone will say, "What's it like flying a 777?" And I go, "Okay, well," I
That's
go, "It's."
interesting.
I will usually do a very one-word answer, "Nice." Yeah, uh,
Well, that's a
but
good point. Like, we break the sterile cockpit probably more, or we let the sterile cockpit get broken. It's not a if my wife tries to talk to me when I push the throttle in for takeoff, I just don't respond. Like, I'm
right,
focused.
right,
We she might make a mistake or might not even be aware of what she's doing in that case, but I'm not gonna engage. You can't respond,
yeah,
and I think it's beholden to the pilot in command and probably the instructors to say, "Hey, we're not doing this. We just said we're not doing this." Now,
right,
DPE, you're evaluating. You're doing that on purpose. You're
yeah,
engaged. Um,
yeah,
but man, please stay quiet unless you see a fire or a tower or another aircraft that I may not see,
right.
um, which then is a reason to break the rule of sterile cockpit.
Well,
But
I think CFIs, I think we're guilty to an extent of always wanting to teach. And, I think the amount that a CFI talks should be inversely proportional to the level of your student. Yeah, that first flight, are you going to be talking to them all the way out? And, again, that this is flight critical, so it's not a violation of sterile cockpit, obviously, if you're teaching. But sometimes we should pick and choose, as the student starts getting closer to getting their pilot's certificate, maybe the amount of talking that you're doing should be coming down a little bit because so now the applicant gets in there with me, and I'll brief him. I'll say, "Hey, look, I'm not gonna talk a whole lot," and I will even say there might be awkwardly silent, you know, stretches in there, and I'm telling you, the applicants, it drives them crazy. You know, they just can't stand, "Okay, oh," you know, it's too quiet. Are you okay over there?" "Yeah, I'm okay. I'm alright." But 'cause they're not used to it. They're not used to silence in the cockpit.
Yeah, that's probably something that we could do better at from a teaching or training perspective for sure. So let's talk. We did a little pre-flight. Okay, we're gonna do sterile cockpit. We're gonna communicate about this stuff. We're gonna abide by our own rules. Next, in-flight discipline. Um, the pilot in command's the one doing the work. There may be passengers. How do we keep ourselves from getting distracted? I think aviate, navigate, communicate is obviously the easy one that we all learn early on. Um, how do we balance that autopilot distraction? How do we and I think I struggled with it in my vision jet training. Um, extremely fast aircraft, faster than anything I've flown, things coming at me quick. I got to a point where I started calling out the scoreboard on the autopilot just to make sure I knew exactly what I thought was happening was happening. And so if I touched any button on the autopilot anywhere at all, I called out what was on the scoreboard above the Garmin G3000 to make sure that I knew the components that were programmed. Was auto
Yeah,
throttle on? Yes or no? Was it
yeah,
set to the speed that I wanted to, or was it the actual system managing the speed based on its parameters? Is the heading or GPS what I'm following, right? We talk about the CDI button a lot when we're learning how to fly, and I can remember people telling me there was this $500 button. I'm like, I can't believe a button costs $500. But now I understand what that CDI button does. But in the Vision Jet, if you think you're following a GPS track, but you're following a heading, you're never gonna get to that GPS track, and that's
yeah,
probably just as distracting or damaging as anything else that could be. I think we have to manage that buffer of distraction with that autopilot. For me, it's really calling out the scoreboard and making sure, "Hey, I wanna be on auto throttle on. I wanna be in GPS mode, GPS mode's on."
right.
And altitude select, it's I wanna fly at flight level 210, and it is on flight level 210. I'm climbing to that number now. That's
Yeah,
important stuff to not get
those
distracted.
at United Airlines, those are actually required callouts. We don't call it a scoreboard, we call it an FMA, which stands for Flight Mode Enunciator. So those are required callouts, LNAV, VNAV, flight level change, heading select, whatever it is, because, you know, what we say is when you push the button, it's like ordering off the menu. What comes up on the FMA, or in your case, the scoreboard, is what you actually get. You may
Yeah.
order a chicken sandwich, but you got a hamburger. Okay, so just because you push the button doesn't mean you got it. And there are times where you might push the wrong button. You know, I know on the 757 777 versus 737, if I want heading select on a 737, there's a button under the heading select knob that you push for heading select. On a 777 or a 7576, if you push that button underneath it, it's heading hold. So you can always tell a pilot that has recently come off the 737 on the bigger airplanes because they hit heading hold when they want heading select. Well, if you're looking at your FMA, boom, you look down and there it is right there. You know, it says heading hold. Well, it says it right there in front of you. So, but you gotta read it. So again, so what you're doing, those are required callouts for us at United Airlines.
That's awesome. I love that analogy of what you ordered might not be what you get, because I can
Right.
assure you I've probably ordered 1,000 things that I didn't get, and it took me a little bit to figure it out. Um, but it is a distraction that will overwhelm you, and it can overwhelm you when you're close to the ground, which could be very dangerous for all of us.
Yeah.
Um, man, I think my configuration of how I fly is a big less distraction for me nowadays too. As I said, I very rarely have my iPad on my knee board nowadays. I can. I use a great Flyboys Pivot knee board. They're not a sponsor, but they're a great partner, and I do think they make the best stuff. That that knee board is now a pad of paper and 2 pens, and I don't really use my iPad. Now, my iPad's normally within reach. I use it as a backup for traffic. I use it a backup for plates and plans, but it is a backup. I am using the equipment on the cockpit for to help me with my navigation. But my pad and pen are so less distracting than the iPad. From the iPad overheating to going to sleep to the display not being bright enough, I could go into a million reasons of how hard sometimes it is to manage your iPad and keeping it charged, functional, the way you want it. On short flights, yeah, easy peasy. But on a 3-hour flight, that's a lot of work that I'm not
Right,
sure we need for 3 hours in straight
right.
level flight at 9,000 feet. I'm not sure that's the most important thing that we need to worry about.
Yeah,
So I would challenge everyone to simplify your CRM, your cockpit resource management to the bare minimum.
yeah, yeah. Well, that's a good way of putting things. Um, one distraction that I really, really wanted to talk about, and as we're getting to, over 30 minutes here, but, I wanna talk about this because this has caused people to die, and, that's what we're trying to prevent is accidents where people die. Um, and that's cockpit doors coming open. Um, it happens, probably in Beechcraft airplanes, and, this isn't banging on a particular manufacturer, but, I just remember looking at a twin-engine airplane at Hooks Airport probably 5, 7 years ago. It wasn't yours, but it belonged to another flight school that went off the runway because they had a door open on takeoff, and they attempted to reject the takeoff and went off the runway and totaled the airplane. In this case, there wasn't anybody that died. There wasn't anybody that got hurt or anything. But I think one of the things that I've started incorporating in the ground portion of my check rides is talking to applicants and more so in Piper airplanes and Beechcraft. Doesn't seem to be as big of an issue in Cessnas that have the 2 doors, but, I talk to the applicants about what's gonna happen if you're rolling down the runway and the door opens, and most of them tell me that they've never discussed this. They've never discussed it with their instructors, and the vast majority of them tell me that they're gonna reject the takeoff over an open door, and I can't say that that's wrong, but I will say this, it's not what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna keep going. I'm gonna take the airplane airborne, and an open door in a Piper is a non-event, okay? Now, do we wanna fly 3 hours to our destination with that door open? Probably not. But can we come back in and land the airplane and close the door? Yeah, we can. So I would challenge the CFIs out there to at some point in your training, uh, at least discuss this. Discuss how you're going to manage this because uh, most of us have noise canceling headphones right now, and so you might not even know it. You might not even know that the door opened, especially if you're in the left seat and the door is over on the right side, because it's going to stay pretty much flush with the airflow, but, probably not something we wanna continue to our destination with.
No, for sure. And are these planes safe to fly with the door open? Is it maybe a misconception of what that means?
Oh, yeah, yeah, you know, uh, I actually, a couple of weeks ago, took a helicopter instructional flight in
All
a
right.
Robinson R-44. It was just incredibly awesome, but, we the doors were off the helicopter. The doors we didn't the doors were gone. They took them off. And so we go out and, The instructor says, "Okay, make some turns," and I'm going. Of course, in the helicopter, the flying pilot sits on the right in the right seat, and the left turn wasn't so much of an issue, but boy, when we made that right hand turn, it was a little weird for me. I'm looking down there going, "Man, I hope this seatbelt works." But
Hope centrifugal force on this steep turn is helping me stay in my
yeah.
seat.
I mean, I can't tell you in my flying career, I don't know how many hours, but I've had lots of doors open. In fact, going either to or from Oshkosh, I think it was going to Oshkosh last, just a few months ago. We stopped for fuel and we take off, and I'm in the right seat. My wife's in the left seat. She's flying our Saratoga, and I I left the door open. Okay, we take off and we're about 500 feet. I look up, I go, "Oh boy, look at this." And so we just turned around and came back and landed the airplane. And, there's can you close it in flight? Yeah, you can. And in fact, there's one flight school that even has a checklist for it. And if you slow the airplane down and you open up that little window on the left-hand side, you can get it closed. However, it's not very conducive for one person on their own to do it. It's almost a two-person job, and so if you got 2 pilots, it works really well. Uh, One pilot and one non-pilot, it might work, but by yourself, it may be kinda tough to do that.
Well, yeah, and aren't you always close to the ground? Like, this sounds like a disaster waiting to happen. Let me try and save 5 minutes to close this
Yeah,
by myself.
absolutely.
Man, I always say one more lap in the pattern is about 6 minutes.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
not gonna set any of us back, ever.
Yeah, and
Okay.
on the big jets, I mean, we have big windows on the flight deck, and because they're escape hatches, they're emergency exits. Basically, it's how if we have a bad problem, we can go out the window. We got ropes that we pull down, and we shimmy down the rope. Um, but at United Airlines, our procedure is in the high speed regime, which is above 100 knots. If a cockpit window opens up, we continue. Think about that, and
That would be shocking.
these are big windows. They're really big, and and they're right there. I mean, you could touch it with your elbow. So the airplanes are designed to fly with that. And, if it were at night, especially if it were cold and raining, uh,
Mm.
at 120 knots, that window opens, it would be hard. I mean, just because you're going to feel these senses. There's going to be loud noises. It's going to take you a little while, I don't know, second, maybe, I don't know. It's gonna take you a while to process what just happened. But
Yeah, you
that
have
is
no idea how it happened, why it happened, you'd be freaking out. You know,
right,
yeah.
and you don't care the why. You know the what. Okay, this window came open. Did it come open because I left it open? Was there a mechanical failure? The problem with the Saratoga going to Archer, it was not a mechanical failure, it was me. 100% me. I left the door open.
And not many people would, admit to that, but that's good. People need to be able to feel comfortable saying, "I made a mistake." None of us are perfect. None of us are gonna fly a perfect flight. I think that's a good place to wrap it up. The best pilots aren't the ones who never get distracted, Wally. They're the ones who catch the distraction early and make it stop. They
Yeah.
tell they tell their wife, they tell their friend, "Hey, sterile cockpit. It's 5 minutes from now, we'll be able to talk," whatever. Um, on your next flight, whoever you are listening to this show, try to consciously note every little distraction you have. Essentially, just write it down, make a note of it, debrief with your instructor, debrief with yourself. You might be shocked, but if you can start recognizing these distractions sooner than you may be able to today, you're going to be a much better pilot. As always, fly safely and stay behind the prop.
Thanks for checking out the Behind the Prop podcast. Be sure to click subscribe and check us out online at BehindTheProp.com. Behind the Prop is recorded in Houston, Texas. Creator and host is Bobby Doss. Co-host is Wally Mulhern. The show is for entertainment purposes only and is not meant to replace actual flight instruction. Thanks for listening, and remember, fly safe.